when I read their objectives for the job, it aligned with what I was trying to accomplish. And so I'm invested personally and professionally in generating change for communities that are marginalized, and I feel Kansas Appleseed is dedicated to that. So.
And that is the objective. So Kansas Appleseed is a non-for-profit, nonpartisan, right, organization that is focused on addressing those economic, what are some social,
racial, political
issues in which individuals are marginalized, where they don't necessarily have a voice. And so Kansas Appleseed wants to ensure that you all are filling in the gap and asking those questions and organizing those folks who can make that difference and make that change. So 3 different issues I heard you mention, which was the child welfare reform.
Foster care, more specifically, but child welfare obviously is encompassed in that.
So that's like, my first love. Yes. Right? Not including my husband and my children and God. Foster care, like that's it, right? I'm passionate about it. So is there something specifically that Kansas Appleseed has identified that needs to be reformed? Because I can tell, talk to me, because I'll tell you a whole bunch of stuff. But are there specific objectives that you want to kind of look into or delve into? What is it?
Yeah, well, with my 2 days, what I've learned from what I've read is starting with a report and moving from there, trying to accomplish, now we have attention in a space that previously wasn't. I have been screaming about what I have noticed within child welfare and foster care ever since I have interfaced with the system, right? Even previous to my education. And so with that being said, a report and then actually trying to create some kind of improvement in the system and having actual plans to disseminate to people to try to accomplish that work.
Okay.
That is my quick overview, but Bennett can talk more specifically about objectives and tracking how we're making this progress, right?
Absolutely, because we know that there's a task force that's happening in Topeka. And so I'm assuming that they'll have a report that will come out. Are you going to look at that maybe? How do you form your objectives on what issues to address?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, as Trinity mentioned, we are putting together a report pulling from that task force's investigations, other data that we've been pulling together, as well as feedback we've been getting from people in the community as we host community forums, hearing from foster parents, youth who have been in the foster care system, parents of biological parents, a whole range of stakeholders to make sure that we're hearing as many perspectives as possible. Mm. I think one thing that has stood out to me in that process is the crisis that we're seeing in the foster care system in Kansas. In some ways seems to be the tip of the iceberg, or a symptom of a much deeper problem in our community, which is that really over the past 8 years, we have pulled out a lot of support for families. Mm-hmm. We've stopped investing in families, and now we're starting to see the effects of that. And so when we pulled back child care assistance, pulled back TANF support to families, those families got pushed to the edge, mm-hmm. and then we started to see an increase in removals into the foster care system.
Man, there have been so many cases where it feels like, man, we could have done this a different way, right? So I've been, just within my experience, just representing parents who literally their first contact, so they come to court and their child has been removed, and we're having the temporary order of custody hearing. And it just feels like, man, if we could have provided some assistance before we got to this point, so preventative care, which is so important. And then there's also this racial disparity. More minorities are more likely to end up in the foster care system. And so we need to really look at how the system is put into place to where that is a reality. But yeah, I think that this work it's so important. It's so needed. I love how you are making contact with foster parents, with bio parents, with children who have been in the foster care system, because they have the real life experience. Is there anything interesting that you think has come out of some of those forums or some of those meetings?
One of my first tasks is creating a forum in Wichita, so I've yet to do that forum, but
Because you've just been here 2 days.
Yeah, but I will let Dennis speak to that, but honestly, I want to speak to that because you're exactly right, and I do research around this, like the Adopt and Safe Families Act and how the timeline impacted families, and so with that, what I have seen is that these women and people that interface with the child welfare system are having very similar stories and very similar barriers to upholding their parental rights when it comes to their children. It's very circular reasoning, and often, like you said, just having access to resources could have prevented it.
Yeah.
And in my education, we're taught about preventative care and the shift to prevention instead of just addressing it in crisis and not being crisis orientated. And we even talk about protective factors, but what I have seen that then protective factors don't translate to Black, brown, and poor bodies, and I need that to happen. So I need the services to not respond differently to different communities, and we'd have a lot of improvement.
Okay. So having a real conversation, and sometimes an uncomfortable conversation about what has been happening and how we can fix it. Because we can't, we're losing foster homes, right? So we're putting these kids in care and we have literally nowhere to put them. And oftentimes these kids experience so much trauma just going through the system that the question is asked, I feel like they were better off in their own home, right? To where they weren't exposed to, so many kids pick up different behaviors, they pick up criminal charges just because of different, situations that they're in. And so if we can figure out a way to keep them in their home and safely, then we need to figure that out, because there are absolutely situations and circumstances where we need to remove kids from the home. But that's not every case, and that's not every situation. And I think you bring a valid point up, just making sure that we are responding the same exact way to everyone's situation, regardless of who they look like, who they are.
Because that disparity is there for a reason, right?
Absolutely.